So it's not very late, but I'm over it. But I'm having dinner with my parents tonight, and they tend to do that earlier than I would. So
That's usually how it goes. As you get older, I think you eat earlier and earlier, but you also wake up earlier and earlier. There's that great episode of Seinfeld where Jerry's father has gotten a job from Elaine at what is it? What's the name of the the fashion house? J. Peterman. And she doesn't know how to deal with him, and George is just like, just book a late meeting because these old guys, they get up at 4 a.m. by like 5 o'clock, they're wiped. That's where I'm headed. I think I'm gonna be advancing in age. I think a little like faster than the mean. So I think in about 6 years I'll be in Florida getting like the early bird special at 4:30, some chicken fried steak and a salad. I'm looking forward to it actually.
yeah, I actually just got done with spending. Just got back from my weekend among the old people in Florida. I was debating Gene Epstein at the Soho Forum, which they're doing in the Villages now, which is like a weird, like that's like a Twilight Zone episode itself.
Wow, that sounds really interesting. Here, why don't we start things off, and then I want to hear more about that. Welcome one, welcome all, welcome rulers to Night Rule 31. We haven't had many night rules lately. It's been a little light on the night ruling, a little light on the partying. People have been busy. They've had a lot of obligations. Some people are in lockdown again. But we're extremely thrilled to be joined by a friend of the show, professor, author, host of Give Them an Argument, and man of the people, Ben Burgis. Welcome, Ben.
Well, thank you, Isaac. Just got done doing doing another podcast, but it's late in the afternoon in my time zone, so I've got some good Michigan beer, and I'm ready to cut loose and talk about the Twilight Zone and whatnot.
Awesome. Yeah, well, it's always a pleasure to have you. Like, honestly, I think, Ben, I would imagine you would be one of the most fun people to have at a party. And again, I'm imagining a post-pandemic world. But like in terms of like, coming late at night, going to a friend's house and having like a bawdy, raucous, subversive discussion about politics and culture, I can think of none other more suitable there's no more suitable person to invite. So I saw your spot on Jacobin Weekend today. It was really good. You're talking about your book, which is Canceling Comedians While the World Burns. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Beautiful. And that just came out, in the last month or so, right?
It's actually, as we are having this conversation, it is not quite officially out yet. It officially comes out on May Day. But I know if I can be crass and insert a plug in here, that
Please.
If you order it, and I understand most people just get it from Amazon or whatever out of habit, but to the extent that I can, I've been trying to direct people to Red Emma's, which is a worker-owned bookstore in Baltimore. You can order from online, and so even though the official street date is not until May Day, if you order it from Red Emma's, I know they've already got in stock. So like some people have already gotten their copies.
Fantastic. Yeah. Actually, nice to see you walking the walk as well as talking the talk there. I think that's a nice, really, I think we're in a time right now where these questions of, our means of distribution, the platforms we have access to, whether we're independent of a larger kind of nefarious superstructure, a la, a behemoth like Amazon. Like we should all be asking these kinds of questions. To be honest, it's really probably one of the reasons why I've kind of stalled with Night Rule. Like I don't want to start the Discord, and I don't really want to start the YouTube and whatnot until I feel like I want to define the parameters a little bit, because I feel as though in an atomized world of a kind of YouTube and podcast commentariat, if it's like a Wild West where everyone's just kind of running their own show, a la Deadwood, it's not all going to turn out great, a la Deadwood. Sometimes it's just going to be really bad.
So maybe it's been too long since I watched Deadwood, but I don't think it turned out great.
Yeah, that's probably true. There were some rough edges, but it's just I don't think it's going to go away. This question of like the kind of new independent media vanguard on places like YouTube. We're seeing things right now where people are really like making a name for themselves by trenchantly and fearlessly calling out people like the Squad and AOC, and I've heard some people ask, who is it? Why is it that a YouTuber has the authority to call into question someone who's actually trying to do things on the ground? And it makes me wonder if we really need some kind of superstructure or some connective tissue of accountability to avoid going down all these different kind of counterproductive paths, of self-promotion, of vilification, of a lack of accountability, a lack of transparency.
Yeah. So I guess the first thing I want to say, just because I could, because I think it's true, and also because if I didn't say it, I'm sure somebody would watch this and accuse me of not thinking it, is that nobody's immune from criticism. If AOC or Bernie Sanders or
Of course.
whoever does something that's objectionable politically, you should criticize them for it. I mean, I don't Bernie Sanders, I think, is actually perfect. I think it's like the Virgin Mary and Catholic theology. He's the like immaculate old Jewish man. But no, I think that I think none of these people are perfect. They're all like none of them should be immune from criticism. But I would also say that there are more and less useful kinds of criticism, and that there are kinds of criticism that are helpful, and there are kinds of criticism that seem to be mostly about tearing down things that we should be trying to build up. And I don't want to go into sort of making cynical speculations about motivations, because I think we do too much of that. But I do think that whatever the motivation, it's if you're encouraging people to think that there's no meaningful political difference between, somebody like AOC, who I have my criticisms of, and
but it exists in a completely different universe than like a Chuck Schumer or Nancy Pelosi, or God forbid anyone on the Republican side, right?
Yeah, exactly, right. Like, and if you're blurring that distinction, if you're criticizing them in such a way that that like you're encouraging people to think that they do exist in the same universe as them, and there aren't fundamental differences there, and that it's not actually important to support social democratic insurgents like this against the democratic establishment, then the only person who benefits from that is Pelosi, Schumer, like that. If you're draining left enthusiasm for the few people that we've gotten elected, that strikes me as extremely unhelpful, right? So I have nothing against saying, look, I think AOC did something wrong, or hypothetically, if you can even imagine such a thing, Bernie Sanders did something wrong. Like I have no problem with saying that, but I think that you should be able to make distinctions between friends and enemies, and if you in the same way that it's counterproductive if you can't label an enemy as an enemy, it's counterproductive if you can't label somebody who's on your side as being on your side. And I think that it is oftentimes true that that if like there are lots of ways that it can be really good in left media to pander to what people want to hear. Like that, we're not immune from market incentives, and that's what those incentives strongly favor.
Well, and everyone loves a good denunciation, cultural
Yeah.
revolution style, just like, oh, you're a counter-revolutionary, you're a counter-revolutionary. It's fun. It's like the ultimate party game. Like, what do they call those? Like Mafia or Among Us, but like, it's a problem. It's problematic to me if we don't develop some kind of mechanism to ameliorate that, because that is the system we're inheriting with these online platforms that are really, geared towards things like just pure vilification and like a negative, just chasm of a bottomless pit of hate.
I mean, if people are excited about something, then you're going to get more clicks and more views and more everything, right? If you like feed into whatever they're excited about. And I mean, I think, I mean, I don't want to like, I mean, I don't want to say this in a way that really sounds like too much like I'm tooting my own horn, because trust me, I've gotten plenty of shit wrong in the last few years. But I think, but I also think like I am kind of proud that, you know, like on our show we didn't do that with you know, we didn't do that in the aftermath of the election when there was all of this kind of left liberal hysteria about, you know, how you know, Trump wasn't going to leave office and there was going to be a coup or something like that. And then I'm also proud that we didn't do that with Force the Vote, you know, because both of those things, and some people, you know, manage to do both somehow, you know, which is like, you know, which always really confuses me, that if you think like that, like even AOC is like a sellout and is basically worthless, but also you think that Joe Biden is so dangerous to the powers that be that there are like generals and you know, business interests that are going to support a coup to stop him from taking office. I don't really understand how those two thoughts coexist in the same head. But in any case, right, like both of those things were really good for building an audience by pandering to people, and I'd like to think that we didn't do that. It's like, I know there's a Lenin. There's like a pamphlet by Vladimir Lenin from like the early debates between the Bolsheviks and the Mensheviks called "Fewer, Better." You know, better, fewer, but better. You know, I think is the I think is the name, but I'd like to think that we've tried to build that up a little bit. Like if I that you know, like a you know, tried to like plant the flag for some kind of more thoughtful left, that you know, like certainly very often, right, you know, when I'm on other shows, like I'll see like, and there's like the chat that's racing by, I'll see so much of like sort of people just piling on things and just sort of having these like really intense instant reactions, you know, based on, you know, whether they agree or disagree with what they've just heard, you know, that, oh, this person sucks, they're worthless, they're trash, you know. And I'm always really proud when I see the chat on Give Them an Argument, and it seems like the you know, whoever we are appealing to, you know, it seems like they're thinking about stuff a little bit more and being a little bit less reactive, and that's what we need. I mean, like, I don't know, I mean, everything you're saying about the way that a lot of the left YouTube and left media landscape more generally works is true. I don't really know what the solution is to that Wild West factor, because, you know, I think realistically, I mean, it's not like everybody, I really don't think there's a way to just get everybody to join the, you know, Democratic Centralist Podcasters Federation or whatever. But,
well, we have more chance of the of joining the Space Federation or whatever it's called. But I mean, I'm thinking more along the lines of like, there's no reason why, like, in a world that's going back to the Wild West in so many ways, the value to me of understanding some basic kind of classical organizational principles is really paramount. So, like, for example, like you look at like the history of project management, you know, there's a lot of like, there's a lot of darkness there too, in terms of like human resources and capital being based on kind of statistical analysis of slave labor during like the feudal era in America. But also you look at things like when they built the Hoover Dam, they used what they call waterfall project management, which is about planning things in certain stages, and you drop off work in a waterfall fashion. On the other hand, I think it was either Toyota or Honda invented something called Kanban, or just-in-time project management, where they would have materials in their factory ready just in time and always try and have an inventory of near zero. And I think in terms of like we had, it's a pretty amazing thing when you look at the rise of independent left media in the last 10 years, and the fact that it's a much bigger factor. It's of like profoundly more significance than it was, you know, say even during like just prior to the Bush era, you would say. So there's actually something really like beautiful and amazing about that. But at the same time, if there's no sense of, well, we actually have to be accountable and we actually have to practice what we preach, and there actually has to be a solidarity behind our actions, you know, I think we just really run the risk of, I mean, I think the risks are obvious. What I would propose is like some kind of like shared principles, at least. It doesn't have to be a rigid organizational structure top down. But if someone out there puts out a manifesto saying, look, like, I'm an independent media person and like this is what I believe in terms of like how a fucking organization should operate. And if, you know, say for example, you know, you would disavow anyone a la Tucker Carlson who's proposing some kind of racial whatever theory, what's it called, displacement theory, or you would be completely opposed to any kind of being involved with anyone that had a history or credible allegations of like sexual harassment in the workplace. Because it's really heartbreaking, actually, I think, for fans of these independent media organizations when they, because the engagement level with one of these channels is way higher than with anything like an MSNBC or CNN, right? So, if I'm following X media organization on YouTube for 2 years, and then all of a sudden I find out something that I really don't like about them, something that I feel is really shady, that it's gonna create a profound sense of betrayal as well. And I think people get really emotionally involved, and it's just like we just need some accountability. It's as simple as that. I don't think it's actually like we don't have to, it's not like we're trying to figure out how to go to the moon here. It's like we just literally need to remember what accountability was like in the prior media landscape or in prior cultures.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is, I mean, it's a tough thing because, like, a lot of this is just about getting people to, to calm down, like that, what accountability means now, in our kind of neoliberal late capitalist hellscape, where everybody is incredibly, atomized.
There's that.
And they're angry about lots of things, that oftentimes they're right to be angry, but they're not sure what they're angry about. And is really punitive and vindictive and moralistic, so it's like there's certainly lots of historical precedents for that, in terms of previous cultures, but certainly not ones I like.
Well, I mean, we just need to transition from a more like a base moralism that really is just, I think, anathema to change, anathema to cooperation and solidarity, and really just anathema to thought in some ways. And we need to transition to an ethical practice where we say, look, this is what we're trying to achieve. Who the fuck can we talk to about what people have done to achieve this ethically in the past? There's examples out there. I really want to have Falco, who's in the Feldman Discord a lot. He's a union organizer from Belgium. And I think as soon as his stressful life calms down, he's going to come on and talk about things like, how to have a meeting properly, for example, which is something that is some lost tribal knowledge. What is the purpose of this meeting that we're having? How do we define that?
And having proper accountability, which should actually mean having processes. So,
yeah.
So this is something, for example, that I think came up in a way that was really like stark and disturbing to me last summer, fall, late summer, early fall, I think maybe, I'm trying to remember, when Shahid, I would say his name wrong, Shahid Buttar, who was
right.
a Democratic Socialist candidate who's running against Nancy Pelosi. California has this jungle primary system where instead of partisan primaries, everybody runs in the first round, and then the top two vote getters run in the second round. So he was actually running against, he was the only candidate, right, running against Nancy Pelosi in the general election ballot in the fall. And there were some allegations about sexism and other things that came up that are like real allegations, that the kinds of things that people should take seriously. But also, I was really disturbed by the way that DSA and various progressive organizations in San Francisco sort of instantly took allegation as fact and said, well, okay, if somebody's been accused of these things, they must be guilty, and they withdrew their endorsements without any kind of process, and that bugs me, not only because I think that as more evidence came out, it seemed to me that the case against Shahid was extremely weak.
So what you're telling me, it bothers you that DSA acted as kind of the like wing, as the instrument by which to further like a smear, basically, against someone? Yeah,
exactly. But also, like, even if hypothetically, if he had been guilty, I'm still bothered by having a left culture where we don't believe in some sort of norms of due process. I mean, like, I feel like, look, I'm old enough that I can that, you know, some of my most formative political memories were, you know, about the era right after 9/11, and it seems like a big part of what I was so upset about back then, and what, you know, people who I'd read back then, and, you know, Chomsky's and whatnot, you know, were so upset about, was precisely the fact that in the name of counterterrorism, you know, allegation was being treated as guilt, and we thought that was an important, you know, distinction. And of course, look, obviously DSA and whatever other progressive organizations, you know, don't have the power to, you know, lock people up in a brightly lit cell in Guantanamo Bay for 10 years, you know, thank God. But like, even so, I think in any kind of institutional setting, we've got to have some kind of due process. It doesn't necessarily have to be the same threshold of proof as like a legal conviction, but like at the very least, you interview witnesses, you deliberate, you try to figure out
Yes.
because if you don't do that, for one thing, you're going to be incredibly vulnerable. Like, not only are you going to end up wronging innocent people because you assume they're guilty, but also you're going to be incredibly vulnerable to your political enemies because you'll be the easiest marks in the world. Anytime anybody becomes any kind of threat, you know, all you have to do is put out a whisper campaign against them, and that's that. You know, and that just seems like not a serious way to do things.
Not a serious way. I mean, when you were saying that people don't believe in due process, I mean, it really speaks to, I think, the level of disaster intellectually that neoliberalism has been. Like, really, it's on the level of like a meteor that struck the earth 12,000 years ago and almost completely wiped out all culture. Because, like, due process, the words we have for these things, like habeas corpus, are fucking Latin, a language that hasn't been spoken by a wide swath of humanity for thousands of years. You can go back to the law of fucking Hammurabi. Like, people instinctually, like epigenetically, in their cultural memory, understand things like you can't just, anyone who's accused of anything can't just be assumed to be guilty. Right. This is something that we should try and remember in the face of a world where, you know, why would people believe in due process after going through Reagan and Thatcher and ending up in this cultural and material hellscape, as you say? You know, like, it's a really tough sell, I think, on many levels to, you know, tell people, like, go and watch like old episodes of Law and Order, and you know, like, it's you got to fight for what's right, guys. You know, and that works sometimes. You know, because like
a line from Cory Doctorow, I remember. You know, making me laugh a long time ago, might be true, about how he said that Starsky and Hutch reruns did more to spread you know, ideas about freedom around the world and the Declaration of Independence, because suddenly you had people in all these countries where the reruns were being showed, say, you know, like saying, "Oh, aren't you going to read me my rights?" when they were arrested.
Right. Well, you know, I mean, that's pretty funny, actually. Miranda rights are it's one of my favorite terms, just because it's a woman's name. So it always just makes me think of like Miranda from Sex and the City or something. Like, it's like, oh, my Samantha rights. You got to read me my Samantha rights. I know I watched Starsky and Hutch. Yeah, I mean, I just really think, and I'm hoping to expand the Night Rule podcast using some kind of mechanisms to deal with some of these things. And that's why I want to do it kind of slowly, and I want to do it right. Like, it's just, it seems to me like if you're going to do something where you control it, and you're lucky enough to be in a world where you control it, you should at least try and avoid some of the pitfalls of that pursuit. I mean, this being said, there's probably about 50 people that are going to listen to this, so I shouldn't let it go too much to my head that I have a microphone. I really did let it go to my head that I have a microphone, and ended up just manipulating my microphone stand so much that it just completely shattered. And now I've got the microphone propped up on kind of a makeshift solution here. Okay, well, I also think something that's going on right now that is kind of interesting to me. I mean, I think there's always been this kind of cyclical back and forth between Republican and Democratic presidential administrations, where, you know, say, for example, the Democratic base kind of goes to sleep a little bit, usually during a Democratic presidency. You know, there's usually that turnover in the midterms, in 2 years after the presidential election. But in a weird way, I feel like because of the kind of like hyper real, hyper intense nature of the Trump administration, that like the part of people's brains that knows how to switch back into a Democratic administration has kind of completely burnt out, both on the Republican side, where I think in a lot of ways, I'm very pleased to see this. They don't seem to have the intellectual argumentational weaponry to take on the Biden administration, because they're just too busy talking about Dr. Seuss or whatever the fuck, or trying to do bad stand-up comedy. And then on like the left-wing side, it's like, I don't really think the Democratic base has gone to sleep as much as they usually do. I think they're pretty dialed in, and definitely exerting some pressure in some ways. Although it's obviously like it's this ridiculous mixed bag. I feel like the Biden administration so far, like there's some things where you're like, oh, you know what, like that could really take a bite out of child poverty, for example. And then other things where you're like, okay, well, there's some foreign policy questions where you've got grave concerns. Like we haven't talked in a few months, so I wanted to check in and just get your general thoughts there.
Yeah. So I think, well, I mean, on foreign policy, I think it's been very, very bad that they seem to be conspicuously not in any kind of hurry to even reinstate Obama's greatest foreign policy achievement, which was the Iran deal. The things with Russia have been very tense. Although none of these are about comparisons to Trump. They're just about like just what he's done, just evaluating on its own.
Yeah, we're seeing like a kind of neoconservative foreign policy from a neoliberal Democratic administration, right? Kind of really going out there, balls to the wall, rapacious, saber rattling.
Yeah, I mean, actually, one of the examples that I think gets talked about the least, but really deserves a minute of our time is Biden's Cuba policy, because Obama was starting to open up a bit to Cuba at the end, and Biden, at least in the first few months in office, doesn't seem to have shown any interest in that. In fact, he hasn't even reversed one of the most outrageous things that the Trump administration did with Cuba, which was that kind of at the last minute, within I think literally like the last week or two that Trump was in office, they placed Cuba on the State Department's state sponsors of terrorism list, which is just like absurd on its face. The justification was basically that that like various people who live in Cuba who haven't been extradited, but just because a country doesn't have an extradition treaty with the United States, that can't be good enough to.
That's not how extradition treaties. Yeah, exactly.
Call them a state sponsor of terrorism. And two, there are plenty of people who are walking around Miami right now as free men who've committed terrorism in Cuba. So I think that's like kind of a ridiculous thing on its face. I mean, if in fact in those cases, I think you can make a much better case for the US
certainly
sponsor of that.
I mean, the terrorist label, it's become this thing now. I think most people understand after 20 years post-war on terror, that most people understand now. They hear terrorism accusations and they realize it's a really opportunistic statement in most cases, because there's a lot of terrorism to go around on all sides, so to speak, at this point. And then I feel like in the same way that people understand that when people are talking about free speech, they're really like white supremacists or something. Like people are kind of starting to pick up the signals, I think, on these a little bit better. Yeah. I mean, Cuba, that's such a foreign policy fucking layup, if there ever was one, It's like, oh, hey, like, why don't we let people go to Cuba and like have some like sit on a fucking beach and have a drink, They'll enjoy that. What's the problem? Maybe we can actually like collaborate on some healthcare initiatives, because they're a healthcare kind of superpower, Yeah,
exactly. I mean, like they actually did. They like back, for example, during Hurricane Katrina, they Cuba famously offered to send doctors and nurses and medical supplies, to New Orleans, and it wasn't taken up. I'm sure they would have been happy to, currently during the COVID crisis. I mean, they did send doctors to Italy, when that was like the epicenter of the crisis, as well as
very involved in the Ebola outbreak a couple of years ago.
Yep, exactly. And actually, they have been doing like I mean, they've done a truly remarkable job, certainly domestically during COVID. So, I had there's there is a really ghoulish little thing that I've done as that I've done on a pretty regular basis for a long time, where I check I do two Google searches. One is the number of COVID deaths in the particular county of Michigan that I come from. And the other one is I check the number of COVID deaths in the entire nation of Cuba, which is considerably more populated than Ingham County, Michigan. And right now, to be fair, more people have died in the entire nation of Cuba than Ingham County, but not as much more as you might think. Let's put it that way. And for a long time, it was the other way around. And Cuba is actually testing two vaccines that they came up with themselves, because in the 80s they made a big turn towards biotech, and that's really paid off. And in this, they're going to be sending people to administer it in other countries. They're going to be doing vaccine tourism, where you can come and visit Cuba and sit on that beach and have a drink and also get vaccinated.
That sounds nice. Yeah, right? Cuba Libre and an AstraZeneca, please.
Yeah, exactly.
I like it.
And it really is like at the time in the United States, when you couldn't get a mask for love or money, sent to you in the mail. Cuba, because they have all these nationalized factories where they're doing things like the factory had been churning out school uniforms, and they would just be redirected to churn out masks. And I think it's been a remarkable. I mean, certainly relative to how resource strapped the country is, how small it is, how
Cuba is an incredibly poor country. If anyone has ever been there, the people there have nothing. They're no threat to anybody. Believe you me. Honestly,
not whatsoever. Your biggest, the biggest danger if you visit Cuba is that that you'll be too besieged by people offering to sell you things on the streets. But everybody's got the cousin who works in the cigar factory and has the extras.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think they give there's like a ration of tobacco that people are given, and a lot of them just turn it around and sell it to, because you sell it to an American or a European for $20. That's like probably more than you make in a month.
Yeah, I mean, it's an incredibly poor country, and they've also been like people, like there's a sort of cynical pseudo realpolitik thing that people say when they say, oh yeah, sure, go ahead, blame everything on the embargo, but look at all these other big countries that trade with Cuba. Okay, that's true to a point,
but they're not right fucking there.
yeah, they're not 90 miles away. So obviously the United States is by a mile, Cuba's largest natural trading partner, but also relevant to what we're talking about. There's lots of there's lots of medical technology that you can't get if the United States has a trading embargo on you, because it's exclusively sold by American companies. So I think that given these limitations, they've done a remarkable job. And I know, like, I don't know, it's idiotic. I mean, like the rules for like mainstream American discourse for talking about Cuba always remind me of it's like you have to portray Cuba as if it's like Narnia before Aslan. It's the always winter and never Christmas. That's just like the society that has no redeeming characteristics whatsoever. Every president has found something nice to say about Saudi Arabia. But when Bernie Sanders was running for president, if he said one nice thing about Cuba in between two criticisms of Cuba, that was considered unacceptable. And of course, the big talking point was, "Ooh, Bernie can't be the nominee because he'd lose Florida." And of course, Biden sucked up to the Cubans, and he lost Florida anyway. But I mean, it just seems like you can grow the fuck up and recognize that. That Cuba is a complicated society. As a democratic socialist, I have plenty of criticisms, but it's also one that has accomplished really remarkable things, and it shouldn't be taboo to recognize and praise those legitimate accomplishments.
You've used the phrase of the day, grow the fuck up. If you're interested in telling the world that you're ready to grow the fuck up, please visit us at patreon.com/nightrule to come party with us, with the grown-ups. Yeah, I mean, it's really, Cuba, Narnia is a great comparison because Cuba exists in most people's minds as this kind of phantasmagoria, projected fantasy that really is just a sublimation of a huge electoral force in a major swing state. But again, like, you can win the presidency without winning Florida. It's not as though you have to win Florida every time. You don't need to be completely beholden to one lobby in one swing state. And certainly, like, the fates and existence of an entire nation should not, be superseded by that consideration. Like, it's kind of disgusting.
No, for sure. And, I also, I mean, I would be, who knows, maybe not, but for whatever it's worth, not that this means that I'm infallible about the subject or whatever, but I lived in Miami for 6.5 years. I think, which by the way, Miami-Dade County, Obama won when he was running for president, despite the fact that there was industrial strength fear mongering about him going on among, Miami Cubans.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, I could buy that, for a couple of cycles, you wouldn't win Florida, which again, Biden didn't win anyway. And Biden didn't win anyway, in circumstances that should have been remarkably good for him. So I'm not sure if Democrats are really going to win Florida the next couple times anyway. But look, even if they don't, like, once this is, like, whenever this happens, that the United States fully normalizes relations with Cuba and lifts the embargo, trust me, like 2 years later, this isn't going to be an issue anymore.
Because it never was. It's a non-issue. I mean, really, it's kind of just a long chain of kind of blowback and results from U.S. Interventionism and adventurism, and them, really supporting this Cuban exile movement to the nth degree, for decades upon decades, just like tons of money, tons of funding. So it's a really strange thing. America is one of the only, I mean, maybe the Romans did this too, but like, they're one of the only empires in history to create these proxies, these tiny little proxies, and then make themselves beholden to them right away somehow. I mean, maybe that's an expression of a more common historical process, but it's kind of hilarious to see. It's like, well, go ahead, we're going to give you all these guns and weapons and money, and then they turn around and they're like, okay, you got to do what we say, and it's like, I thought you set them up to control them, not the other way around, guys. Like, don't you know what fucking, like, how to exert power?
Yeah, right. Like, and it's a funny thing too, because it's like, oftentimes in the cases of these proxies, it'll simultaneously be true. I mean, Israel is the obvious example that there are tremendous efforts made at lobbying on their behalf in the halls of power, that there is tons of money being spent. There are incredibly high profile events, they're put on, by lobbyists. None of this stuff is a secret. And in fact, people who do it are very proud of the work that they're doing, because they believe in their cause. But it's like offensive to point it out or to suggest that it has any influence. It's like, oh, wait a second, you think that the America-Israel Public Affairs Committee, which spends enormous amounts of money, flies congressmen on junkets to Israel all the time, etc. You think that there's some relationship between that and the way that American politicians are always doing these weird loyalty pledges, that they about their undying friendship with Israel. Oh, that's just anti-Semitism. You must think that there's a cabal of rich Jews running everything. It's like, well, I'm pretty sure I didn't say that, right? Or it's the same thing with Cuba. That's like, oh, you think that, like, the fact that Florida is this electoral swing state and this, like, you think that this has something to do with the fact that even though nobody could possibly claim with a straight face that Cuba's human rights record is worse than, say, I don't know, China's, never mind like Saudi Arabia, that somehow Cuba is the one that we have to have an embargo on. And it's like, oh, this you sir, you have besmirched the honor of these people who just care about democracy in Cuba. Is like, okay,
yeah. I think we're getting more and more immune to the people that just get the vapors when it comes to these things. You know, like I really think as maybe part of this development of some kind of accountability apparatus or like mechanism or culture. You know, good faith versus bad faith people is a huge element here too. And I think the importance of delineating between those two types has like never become more important. I think it's something people are really looking for and kind of getting better at, hopefully, uh, figuring out, maybe. Hopefully, I'd like to strike a hopeful note in the middle of the show before getting really depressed again by the end. But okay, enough of the unimportant stuff. Let's get on to the important stuff. I wanted to talk about sci-fi with you.
Yeah.
First of all, just because it'll be a tasty kind of introductory morsel, I do know that you recently watched Blade Runner, the Gosling. And you were not too impressed with it. I enjoyed it quite a bit. You know, I think it was a really I would give it 4 stars. It was a really I really enjoyed it a lot. It didn't have much of an ending, which was a problem for me. But other than that, I quite enjoyed it. Why don't you tell me why you
Yeah.
didn't enjoy it as much?
Okay, so
Dying to
first of
know.
all, I should say that it's been a while, actually, since I watched. I don't even remember what made me think of that movie again.
Oh, I
Uh,
thought you'd recently watched it, and that's why you tweeted it
no,
out.
no, no, no. I watched it a long time ago, but somehow or another, it came up in some conversation somehow, or something made me think of it, and I just sort of casually tweeted. Maybe enough time has passed that we can all collectively admit that Blade Runner 2049 wasn't a particularly good movie, and that may have been one of my all-time most hated tweets.
That's
Uh,
awesome. Well, you're going up against the Goths. I mean, you can go up against the forces of capitalism and the bankrupt, zombified,
uh,
zombie army of intellectual defeat. But going up against the Gosling, that's a tough one, man.
yeah, I mean, look, I do think, you know, I do think there were good things about it. I mean, I think the cinematography was amazing.
Roger Deakins, just a legend, probably like one of his best films, I think.
it looked great, right?
Yeah.
Like it was, and it had like it looked really good, and it had some really good atmosphere, and I'm a huge sucker for atmosphere. I think that can take you a long way, and these are elements that can certainly help make something a really good movie.
And I think it transplanted the atmosphere and the tone of the original quite masterfully too. Even from like the audio design and whatnot, like it did feel to me like it was somewhat within the same world, even though the films are 30 years apart, which I think is an accomplishment. I don't know if you felt the same way.
Yeah, I mean, I could see that. I mean, I do think I also think that people were grading it on way too much of a curve because
Mm,
it's
that's fair.
it's so unusual that there is a 30 years later um, sequel to a classic movie or a classic
Mm.
franchise that's not just like god
Complete
awful.
garbage. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, just complete tire fire. Just,
yeah,
just let's all just like you intellectually just push it out of your mind, and no one even remembers it 2 years later. Like they did like a Dumb and Dumber, I think, like 10 years after the original with like other actors, for example. Like, but no one remembers that shit.
yeah, exactly. So just because
Yeah.
it wasn't Blade Runner, Kingdom of the Crystal Replicant, uh, I think very you know uh, yeah, that the South Park episode about that, I always summed it up for me. The but I think people were very forgiving of it, and then so it's like, okay, it wasn't a train wreck, and also it looked really really good, and there was some like cool visual like world
And there was
building.
the Goss at the core of it, who I think was like kind of really good casting for that part.
But
Like
yeah,
maybe I'm just a Goss super fan. I don't know.
sounds like
I
it.
keep on I keep on I keep on using his name in a weird way.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But to me, the like just on a story level, I really didn't
Yeah.
think at all. I think that that the I think that the plot was kind of a weird mess. I think that and I
Yeah.
think also because maybe it was kind of a weird mess, and because it sort of had this feel to, at least to me, like every idea that was bounced around in the writers' room, they were just like, let's just do them all, right? Like we'll just throw everything into the movie. And I think that also meant that that the whole the setup, right, the science fiction setup, didn't really work on a symbolic level the way that it did in the original movie. Like I sort of knew what the replicants were supposed to be and what kind of anxieties were being processed in the movie about what it is to be human and all that stuff. And I just didn't really feel that way about 2049. And
That's interesting. Yeah.
I also just thought that it was like, I don't know, like you had 2 minutes of his like wife that was on a USB stick or whatever, and
Yeah.
and then we were supposed to like care about that when like
Yeah.
when it was crushed, and like just on a storytelling level, that really seemed like not great. And then like on a deeper level, it's like, I don't know, like was I supposed to think that she was like a person? Because if so, that wasn't really clear to me.
It's interesting because I mean, I think that character, I can't remember her name. What was her name? Because she was like a product as well as a person, right? I feel as though kind of the commodification of women and women existing as these kind of like neo commodities in this futuristic hellscape was something that the original film dealt with partially as well. So I'm kind of willing to give that a little bit more of a pass, even though some people view that whole character as extremely problematic. But what you said was interesting when you said the the plotting and it didn't feel as grounded in the science fiction, because it did actually veer more into something that is much more common and much more of the day now, which is kind of a mythology. Kind of there's like a Christ mythology, a special child is born, chosen one. The original had none of that. It didn't exist. There was no mythology other than its own kind of like, it kind of had more of a cyberpunk ethos, as opposed to, there was no chosen one in the original Blade Runner, for example. There was no baby born of a virgin.
Yeah, which and all that stuff also feels a little hackneyed to me. Like I think that it's not that I don't think stuff like that can work in that kind of context. I mean, I think there is science fiction that sort of introduces those like mythological religious elements in ways that I think
Oh, very good point. Yeah.
Work really well sometimes, that you
I think Dune works well in Dune, for example, I would say.
Dune is one of the things I was thinking about. Or I don't know, maybe I don't know if this is this would be a widely agreed on example, because I obviously the ending was very bad, but up until then I thought the Battlestar Galactica reboot would be an example that I think used some of those kinds of elements very well.
Another Ronald D. Moore show. There was that episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation where Picard dies, and then he sees Q as God, and you really don't know if Q is God, but he plays this kind of quasi godlike role, and he goes through this like trial kind of thing. It's very interesting when done well with like good writing, for sure.
Yeah, but in this case, it just sort of felt like, okay, we need to throw something in that like would like to kind of structure the plot around, and we need something to like, I don't know. It sort of felt a little bit like you could feel okay, what's going to take this to the next level? Well, we'll do this like chosen one thing, and it was the kind of thing that I just felt like I'd seen too many times before, and it wasn't. It's like it's not. It would be unfair to say that it's like watching the the second Matrix movie when the Keanu gets into the architect's office and you get like the incoherent babbling about the
that was a moment. Do you remember that moment? Like collectively the world just like their minds rebelled as one. They all cried out and then were silenced, because everyone was looking forward, like everyone was going to lose their collective shit over the Matrix 2, because the Matrix 1 was a big fucking deal back in it was the 90s. Okay, there wasn't much going on. The Matrix was a big fucking deal.
No, for sure. But yeah, like it just seems like they couldn't like, okay, you need to have some kind of twist when he gets up to the architect's office and gets the speech, but they couldn't really come up with one. So they just had all this stuff that sounded sort of profound if you didn't think about it, but was just sort of incoherent babbling. And that was that. And then they did the third movie that was like did like a bunch of things that I think are like really earmarks of like bad, weird, sloppy sequels where they're like trying too hard to replicate specific moments from earlier movies,
Mm.
where you have it's like the same way that in uh, the same way that like okay, in the original Star Wars movies, everybody loved Boba Fett. So even though he's a throwaway character, supposed to outscreen for 30 seconds,
Mm.
in the prequels, the entire history of the universe revolves around him.
Yeah.
Okay, well, Agent Smith was cool, so now there's like this army of 1,000 Agent Smiths,
Yeah.
and it's just it's goofy and it's and none of that stuff. Like people still watch. Uh,
Crass. Yeah.
yeah, people still watch the first one, and I'll still run like sometimes like at the first day of class as an icebreaker. I'll ask people for their favorite movies, and I'll still get like 19-year-olds who will say like The Matrix is their favorite movie. I've certainly never had anybody tell me that the Matrix Reloaded or the Matrix Revolutions was their favorite movie.
You should take a few steps back if you hear that come out of someone's mouth, because this person could be their total wild card. Listen, I know we're coming up against the clock here, but I want to make sure we get some time in for some more. I want to do a Terminator Lightning Round to top us off. By the way, if anyone out there listening wants to find the Chosen One on Twitter, you can follow us at Pod Rule. It's very much a prestige account still. Let's get that up to 100 followers, everybody. It will be much appreciated. I wanted to ask you as well, before we go into the Terminator Lightning Round, about this, because we actually came up our last conversation, I believe. We talked about this Twilight Zone episode. I brought it up, but I don't think you had seen it yet. And it's also connected to Star Trek because it stars a one William Shatner. This is a Richard Matheson penned script from, I believe it's this first season or second season?
Second season.
Second season, The Nick of Time.
Yep. Yeah, no, really enjoyed that. And yeah, it is amazing every time I watch like a Twilight Zone episode that oh, that was really good. You should look that up on Wikipedia. It's always Matheson. And then yeah, it was obviously a treat to see Shatner doing it, and it's a good yeah. I mean, I think it has a lot of the elements of that make good for a good Twilight Zone episode in terms of atmosphere and paranoia and ambiguity.
And just an amazing intro. The prose in the intro by Serling is just, it's magnificent. I actually featured it in the last episode, but yeah, we could probably do it without spoilers. But the setup obviously is William Shatner and his fiance or newly married wife. I think they just got married. They're on their honeymoon.
Yeah.
And they're driving across. They're in some Midwestern town, and they stop in a diner for lunch. By the way, I love how they hate their food at the diner. The guy's just like, oh, I should have some chicken fried steak, and they're like, no, I'll have the sandwiches, and they get like stale bread. I don't know why. I just love that little touch.
It's a nice touch.
But there's what is it that's on their table that turns out to be problematic for them?
This little like 1950s ass fortune telling machine that you put. It's like I think it's like also a napkin holder, maybe even, or else it's like right next to the napkin holder.
Yeah.
And you put it's probably not even a quarter, but whatever. You put a coin in, and then it puts out this little printed out message, like a fortune cookie message or something.
Yeah.
But as they're sort of playing with it in a very lighthearted way at first, asking it questions. It sort of reminds me of the first time that I had a friend of mine got a phone that had Siri on it, and would sort of pass it around and ask it questions. Just
absolutely. Well, it's hard. But is the Bechdel test or something like that? Where people can tell whether they're talking to an AR or not. It really reminds me of that whole conversation,
Turing test, yeah.
Turing, right.
Yeah, the Bechdel test.
No, Bechdel is the movies where two women have a conversation about something other than a man, yeah.
Yeah. So, and it is really, which by the way, I think the first time we did that, I started. I thought it'd be fun to ask Siri some philosophical questions, and so I asked it if there were objective moral truths, and of course
Oh
she
my
said,
God.
um, "I'm sorry, I don't understand the question. Can you rephrase?" And I said, "Well, are some things objectively right and some things objectively morally wrong?" I said, "I'm sorry, I don't understand the question. Could you rephrase?" We went through like 9 or 10 iterations of it until I said, "Okay, Siri, is there a good reason I shouldn't kill people?" To which her response, I swear to God, was, "The nearest mental health facility is."
Oh my God.
Wow.
Okay, well, that's yeah. I don't know. I'm feeling many different things right now. I'm gonna have to come back to that because that's kind of scary, but I guess I'm kind of glad it was trying to direct you
Yeah,
somewhere.
that it's programmed if somebody sounds like they're about to do something violent to direct them there. Yeah. No, that's probably just.
I'm also glad that we're embracing the self-management model for people having violent thoughts and tendencies. Please go if you want to murder someone now, press 1.
Exactly. So they're sort of in a very lighthearted way at first. They're asking it questions, and it's done in a very skillful way where all of the answers are technically the kinds of things that could just be random answers.
Exactly.
But it also feels like every single one of them is very on point for what was being asked.
Yeah, he asks it, "Oh, am I going to get the promotion?" And it says it's been decided in your favor. And then he gets a call a few minutes later, or he calls the office a few minutes later and finds out that, yeah, he's got it.
Yeah.
But how much of this is just self-fulfilling prophecy is a core question of the episode. It never really gets really resolved. I feel as though free will is a major theme of it, that it really explores artfully. There's a moment where they avoid an accident really narrowly. It's like the question of if I'm running across the street and I'm almost hit by a car because I decided to try and make it, but I almost didn't.
Yeah. Did you watch Arrival? That movie?
That's the is that Amy Adams?
I don't.
No, I never saw it. Yeah, I know the one you mean though. That was the. Don't they get like they're trying to decipher an alien language or something?
Yeah,
It's First Contact.
Yeah.
Yeah, I liked the movie a lot. I liked the original story even better. It is the original short story by Ted Chiang is called "The Story of Your Life," and he does, and it's very much along these lines that about about predicting the future, and it's something that Chang, the guy who wrote that, has likes to explore and has in different stories. So he's got one I really like. It's a novella called "The Time Traveler at the Alchemist's Gate," which is it's a time travel story, or really like a couple of linked time travel stories that are sort of they have a medieval Arab setting, and they're sort of very much in the vein of like that classic, meeting death on in the marketplace and fleeing to Baghdad, and that kind of thing. So yeah, it was really it was really good in that regard, and I think it did a really nice job of very strongly suggesting that something spooky was going on, but without ever quite exactly coming out and saying it, and then exploring all this stuff about prophecies about the future being true because you think that they're true and all of that.
And I feel as though, I mean, it doesn't really have a traditional twist per se at the end, and I'm not going to give it away, but I feel as though the ending does a really good job of kind of closing the circle and really making it seem as though nothing's truly been resolved, and these questions of free will and destiny and all this is something that you never really figure out completely. It's almost, it exists in this kind of Moebius strip kind of cyclical environment, which I thought was really, really cool. And also kind of a depressing ending too, which I always enjoy as depressive. So we're coming up against the clock here, so I do want to enter the Terminator Lightning Round. I wanted to mention I haven't finished it, but I've been enjoying the early Sarah Connor Chronicles. There's this amazing scene I wanted to call out in the pilot where John Connor has been whisked away to some new high school and he's living under an assumed name with Cersei, or I'm just going to call her Cersei. I don't care. She's amazing too. She totally anchors the show very well. But they sent a Terminator to be like the substitute teacher going through schools, and the Terminator knows his alias. So there's this amazing scene where the teacher is doing roll call on his desk in pen, calling out names, and then meanwhile he's reaching into his own Terminator leg and readying his gun so that when John Brown or whatever John Connor's alias comes up, that he just tries to shoot him. It's like just this amazing moment where Terminator as a franchise can kind of actually delve into something that I think is much more subterranean under the surface, talking about actual institutions and the organizational nature of societies, and things like a teacher having this scene where it's in a school and a teacher is giving roll call, which you can talk about as almost like a mechanistic part of the way people are organized, just culturally and socially and historically. And I was just like, that moment I was just like, it's a little uneven. I'm looking forward to finishing the rest, but we're going to do a Terminator Lightning Round as promised. So what we're going to do here, the way this works is we're going to go over really quickly each of the entries in the franchise, and we're going to rate it on a scale of 1 to 5 I'll be backs. 5 I'll be backs, obviously being, something you're going to come back to and watch a lot. 1 I'll be backs being we have to go back in time and ensure that these were never created to save humanity from a dark fate. So we're going to start off with the Terminator, the original entry in the franchise. How many I'll be backs does Professor Ben Burgis give the original Terminator?
5.
Yeah, it's a 4. I don't think you can give it less than a 4. I think arguably a 5. Having recently rewatched it and enjoyed it a great deal, I think it's fair to say it's a 5. And then obviously Terminator 2, I think this is another layup. It's definitely a 5 for me. 5 I'll be backs. I watch Terminator 2 once every few years, but I'm sure I will for the rest of my life.
I really enjoy Terminator 2, and I understand why some people like it, or lots of people, probably most people like it better than Terminator 1. And I like it a lot, but I think to me, it is it's a really fun, actually, what year did Terminator 2 come out?
It would have been like 91, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. So, because I remember the last time I saw it, which was actually pretty recently, but yeah, it's a very it has a very 1980s feel to it in a way I really enjoy, and it's like a fun sort of it's a very fun Hollywood action movie where everything is done just to a T in a way that really represents an era of sort of Hollywood movies that that I guess I personally have a lot of nostalgia for. And so the
early 90s was a golden era for movies, honestly. There was if you just look at 1991 alone, the list of fucking phenomenal movies that came out that year is incredible.
Yeah. And so I think it's great. That said, it's a little fun fact, by the way. My good friend Ryan Lake, who's a frequent guest on the show.
Is that at Chaos Pat?
Yep, that's the dude.
I've invited him on, actually. I'm hoping to have him on sometime. Yeah, really cool, interesting guy. Yeah.
You enjoy that. I think you'd have a good conversation with him. But he wrote his I went to graduate school with him, and he wrote his doctoral dissertation on free will and determinism, and the title of the dissertation is "No Fate But What You Make."
Nice.
So yeah, it's safe to say that he's a very big fan. So I do think that the whole Arnold Schwarzenegger learning to feel emotions thing is a little.
Yeah. You'll get deductions for that. It's true. I now know why you cry, but it is something I can never do. Yeah. So not less than a 5 for T2 Judgment Day.
I think T2 might be a 4 for me, and T1 would be a 5.
Wow.
And so I think, even though again, all the things that I said in its praise before are true. It's also like I think it's also got some elements that are like the Sarah Connor dream sequences
That was
are
added in the director's cut, I believe, right?
interesting. Yeah.
Where she sees Kyle Reese. Yeah.
I thought there were a couple of them, but anyway.
Oh
Whatever.
no, so there's the one where she sees the bomb go off. She's at a playground. That one's in the original. Yeah.
Yeah. I think those are great, and you know,
Mhm.
you're talking about Sarah Connor Chronicles, and I really liked the use that they put of that, you know, to in Sarah Connor Chronicles. Like, it's not a spoiler if you haven't gone to it, you know, but like, there's one of my favorite dream sequences. She's dreaming about going back in time and killing all the scientists involved in the Manhattan Project. So,
Yeah, yeah. That was
the,
not. I like that scene too. Yeah.
but
I mean, a rare show where the voiceover narration doesn't just completely make me turn off. A little bit of an overused trope. Like I was forced to watch a little bit of the show Criminal Minds recently, and I found that like every episode just starts with the most asinine voiceover narration, where it's like Nietzsche said, "There is no true difference between good and evil," and then the show just goes on with like no fucking thematic connection to what was just said. It's like someone just went on the internet and they were like, "Give me a quote about this," and that's how they start their script.
Yeah, I mean the way that it was used in T2 and then again in Sarah Connor Chronicles, I liked, I enjoyed. But
okay, well, what would you give?
Why is it that I like one better? I think there are a couple things. One of which is probably on the nerdiest level. I am a huge sucker for internally consistent time travel, which one I think was in a way that two wasn't.
Yeah, much more so than many of our guests on Night Rule, by the way. Like you've prioritized that to a great extent. It's one of the things I admire about you. One of the many things, Professor Ben Burgis.
Fair enough. And yeah, so I'm a huge sucker for that. So I obviously like that in one. I think it was like a really like tight, elegant kind of causal loop plot.
Yeah.
And which again is something I always really enjoy. And yeah, we should do a whole thing just on time travel sometime. But then also I think that it was sort of yeah, there was this really you know, cyber like the sort of like I think actually really the club where Sarah Connor goes to hide
Tech
out.
noir, yeah.
Yeah, it's called tech noir, you know. So it's a yeah, like there's that nice sort of cyberpunk atmospheric thing that I think they've got going really well in number one. And then I also enjoy the fact that it's a yeah, I think I might have commented to you before. I think it is funny because I remember when I'd rewatched one for the first time in a long time, I'd also rewatched Back to the Future around the same time, and I thought, it's like, oh man, this really probably says something about the Reagan Bush era in American culture, that both movies are about protecting motherhood.
Yeah.
In you know, and of course in Back to the Future, the threat to the mother having the son is that like she'll, you know, kiss the wrong boy in high school.
Yeah, before descending into a really creepy yet bizarrely arousing like Oedipal kind of thing that happens. Yeah.
Whereas of course in Terminator, the threat, you know, was that this ruthless, relentless robot who was, and I loved that detail about how he was just going through the phone book, killing all the Sarah Connors.
Totally.
That he was gonna, but like I think that the fact that it's ultimately set up as a Western, you know, worked for me. That
or like a horror thriller. Yeah.
Yeah. So much of the so much of Terminator 1 is just about, you know, the two gunfighters coming to town and stocking up on weapons and sort of circling each other, you know, before they confront each other.
Yeah. I will say though, like the reason why I would give 2 a 5 and I would give 1 maybe like a 4.5 is mainly just one element, which number one is the jacket that's Shuichan or Schwarzenegger is wearing for the first half of the movie is like the most 80s looking. He looks like he was just walked off stage with a flock of seagulls. And then they kind of came to their senses, the costume designer, by the end of the film, and he kind of had a little bit more of a subdued kind of leather jacket that we're a little more used to. But prior to that, it's like this gray, like 80s, like it looks insane. I'll have to put a picture up for the show. Okay, well, I mean, I think we know these are really the two high watermarks in the franchise.
Yeah.
So maybe we don't need to go too much into detail for the rest of them. But what about Terminator 3 Rise of the Machines. It's like a 1.5 for me in that, like, I'm every 20 years I'm gonna maybe forget how bad it is, and I'll be around someone that hasn't seen it, and we'll be going through the Terminator movies and we'll watch it.
1.5 sounds about right. I was just hesitating because I was a little torn because I really want to give it a 1. But if we call that 1, then what do
We don't have anywhere else to go. Yeah.
Yeah. What number do we use for Terminator Salvation?
Well, or Genesis. I think Genesis has to be a 1, or perhaps even a -1. You know, like I don't even think we would need to turn, like, go back in time to stop Genesis from being made. I think the universe itself is gonna iterate its own black hole and fold back on itself in order to make sure that particular one never gets made. Terminator 4 is more of a mixed bag for me because it's like you're watching it and you're like, okay, well, it's a Christian Bale movie. So, you know, you're like, I like Christian Bale. That's okay. And then you're like, oh, the Resistance has this like nuclear submarine that's their headquarters that's like under the Atlantic Ocean. That's kind of cool. And Michael Ironside is the leader of the rebels. Okay. And then it just kind of goes off into this whole other thing with the main character played by, I think, Sam Worthington, or a similar actor, where, and by the end you just feel so like robbed and bereft of any hope for ever getting to watch something of high quality ever again. Like, there's this amazing scene in Terminator 4 Salvation where, and it actually speaks to the series overall. They're in the future and there's a Terminator that's chasing them, but instead of it being a CGI or like an animatronic Terminator, it's like a guy in a robot suit, like not a guy pretending to be a T500 or whatever, but like literally a guy who's wearing a helmet that has like the Terminator metal face on it, and it looks so ass. It like looks like someone is making a movie in their backyard. You're like, who thinks? And he's trying to do like the mechanical walking and stuff. He's like, and you're like, who fucking okayed this? Like, I was ready to walk out right at that point alone. But it's funny because like so much of the franchise is actually just some dude with a square jaw walking mechanically and pretending to be a robot. But once you put a robot costume on top of it, it just becomes completely absurd, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, the only good thing, I mean, like, some of it was nice to look at. Otherwise, the only good thing about Terminator Salvation is that Christian Bale, since he famously had this freak out that's on tape, where he was losing his shit because like the lighting guy was like stepping into a shot or something, and he starts screaming at him, and the Meishi recorded this amazing song about the epicness of Christian Bale, where they sampled that rant. It's called "Are You Professional?" with like the letter R and the letter U.
Right, like in a callback to Jimi Hendrix, I'm guessing.
So that's the only thing. That's
the only redeeming quality.
Salvation that
okay.
That song.
Okay, so we have to give that one a 1. I think Genesis and Salvation are both a 1. If that's the bottom of the scale, we might want to scrape a little further down below the surface and go into negative territory. And then so Sarah Connor Chronicles in the timeline, I think, would be next, right?
Yeah.
Or around that time. I mean, I think it's. I mean, I'm watching it now, so it's at least a 2.5 or a 3.
Yeah, I mean, it actually.
It could be a 4, really.
Yeah, it actually came out before. I think it had actually already been canceled before Salvation came out, which is annoying on every level, because I really liked Sarah Connor Chronicles a lot, and the sort of double bitterness of it being canceled before the story had been finished, and this like terrible movie coming out was hard to swallow. I think this one is actually really tough for me because I want to give it like a really high rating because just subjectively like I just enjoyed watching it so much. I don't know. I mean, it's also, I will say,
it's firmly the third best.
Oh yeah.
Arguably,
totally. Yeah. I certainly
bronze medal winner, no question. Right. I
certainly don't think there's anything that would be competition, at least for the bronze medal. And yeah, I mean, I also think it's. I mean, I don't know. Like, granted, it didn't finish, and they did.
Yeah, that hurts it.
They did 2 seasons, and it's very and it it probably benefits in my perception from it for the fact that they had like all of these like really interesting, enticing hints about what might be coming, but then they never actually did it. So of course the temptation to that scenario is always to think that, oh my God, if they'd finished it, it would have been amazing, which is usually not true. Because, you know, I mentioned Battlestar Galactica earlier, that would be a classic example.
Oh, plenty of examples. Yeah.
It was like nothing but, you know, it was like half that show was just a nonstop parade of enticing hints. And then, you know, and then the ending ended up being really dumb. You know, like I mean, whatever. I might still go back and rewatch that because I liked it so much.
Yeah, I mean, more than you'll watch Lost, which is like another example of a similar phenomenon. Yeah.
Yeah. And the thing is that I think that we often forget is that TV writers have tons of practice writing beginns and some practice writing middles, but almost no practice writing ends because it's so incredibly rare that you actually get to end something. Even if a show does end in a normal way, by the time you get there, it's probably not the same people writing it, you know, who started it out. All of which is to say that, I mean, like, yeah, in my head, like some stupid part of me thinks that it would have been amazing if they'd finished it, but you know, probably not, right? So I don't know. I guess I think 3.5. I maybe even I kind of want to say 4, something like that.
That's legit. Yeah, I'm right there with you. And then final one before there's be a special surprise bonus question at the very end. We've got Terminator Dark Fate, which, you know, for me gets points for having the furlong. I feel a warm, like we talked about South Park. There's a great episode where they remember the member berries. It's like they're talking about all the reboots and they're just like, remember this, remember this, remember this. And like just seeing like a weird digitally, maybe it must be some digital version of Edward Furlong that exists without any kind of agent or contract in just like the cloud of the studio.
South Park, I think had, you know, this like South Park had, I think the best commentary on the 2016 election. Certainly that you could watch on television. I think they definitely captured something about that.
Oh, when they're on point, and when I say they, I think it's mostly the one guy, Trevor, or whatever. Like it's, I mean, in terms of cultural commentary, I don't know if you can really argue that they are not head and shoulders above like a lot of other people out there. We should talk South Park again sometime. Okay, so but for Terminator Dark Fate, I actually like some aspects of it. I liked the fact that they brought something new with the Terminator itself. Could kind of like split into a liquid and a metal version and then recombine, and they did some fun stuff with that. I couldn't really watch it the first time I tried to watch it. I got bored early on, so I don't think it has the best on ramp. And then the third act is a little bit of a mess. Like if I'm gonna give it like a 2.75 because I appreciated some aspects of it, but I would go back in time and get them to rewrite the whole third act with Schwarzenegger and kind of just like ended up in the same derivative ending too. Like the ending was nothing new.
Yeah, a lot of that, even the stuff that you're praising, kind of feels to me a little bit like trying to remix the hits, you know, and be like, okay, well, people thought this was cool. We can do, you know, like more, you know, like this. It's like, you know, Jurassic Park 10, you know, even bigger dinosaurs.
Right.
So I don't know. I mean, to me, I think I mean, I don't know. 2.75 to 1.5. I mean, like I think it's better than the stuff we've been talking about, but I think that basically if you like, you know, like if you wanted to if like you're, you know, if you were like raising a kid and, you know, the kid watched Terminator 1, oh, this is great, is there more? And you were like, oh yeah, they made one sequel and then there was also a TV show. I think that would be pretty good parenting.
Yeah, that would be good parenting. Yeah, good advice for parents. We'll start a new segment, advice for parents from the Bolshevik left. And then special bonus question: will you Skype with me sometime to help me break out my story idea for a Terminator movie? I mean, I'm a guy with fingers and a keyboard, or at least at the very least the internet, the address of a local internet cafe. You're a philosopher with a penchant for internally coherent time travel narratives. I think it's a match made in heaven. I mean, there's certainly been screenplays spawned from much less. Professor Ben Burgis.
Yeah, no, that sounds good. I actually, it's funny. I remember many years ago when I was in grad school, there was some morning that I was lying in bed, a little hungover, and I was trying to remember. Like I woke up thinking I had like the best idea ever for a science fiction movie. It was so good in my head, and it took me like 5 minutes to figure out that I was just describing Terminator.
People do that all the time. I think when they're writing songs too, they're like, "Man, I love this song." And it's like, yeah, it's because it's "Hey Jude," motherfucker. Well, okay, I'm gonna save my proprietary ideas. I'll shoot you the bullet points soon. I think we can bring the Terminator franchise into new territory, and also like, if people like Ben Shapiro and his ilk can be heartbroken by not being embraced by the Hollywood elites with a career and rewarded with a career as a screenwriter and cultural producer. Before going into the right-wing online commentary, maybe the left-wing commentary can go the opposite way, and we'll all become successful screenwriters and actually affect culture on that level as well. I mean, why not?
Yeah, that sounds good. I mean, actually, did you see that Connor Kilpatrick wrote a article in Jacobin about this guy who'd gone to volunteer with the YPG in Syria, that actually I don't know what stage it's at, but like it's
Oh yeah,
option or something. Yeah, it's
sure.
So anyway, maybe if that movie is which if that movie is successful, maybe this will be a whole thing. It'll be like when it'll be like that point in like the 30s when like you had Faulkner and F. Scott Fitzgerald, everybody were all going to Hollywood to become screenwriters, because their success as novelists. Maybe now all the leftists, can parlay their publications and Jacobin current affairs into jobs at Hollywood.
Well, I mean, it wouldn't come as a surprise to me if groups of people that were interested in things like history and philosophy and systems of thought and interested in conversing in interesting conversations rather than just repeating the same 12 talking points ad nauseum. I wouldn't be surprised if that was a little bit more of a fertile intellectual terrain for things like maybe a screenplay that's good. Because to be honest, Hollywood really needs more of those. I think it's fair to say they're struggling to do some. There's not that many good movies that come out every year, And part of that is probably the process and the way they're financed and the system itself. But part of it is also, Oh, I have to get to the depressing final thought. So remember, we do still exist in this culturally degraded slurry of failed ambitions to produce original ideas outside of the norm, at least in the last little while.
Fair enough.
So with that depressing thought, I shall thank you again, Ben, for coming on. It's always a privilege to talk, always really enjoy it. I'll shoot you a link when this is up. I don't know, I'll probably do an audio version and then maybe this will be the premiere for the Night Rule YouTube, and I will conquer the interwebs soon, or we shall conquer the interwebs together. Enjoy your dinner. Hope the family is doing well, and I'll DM you my my bullet points for our Terminator screenplay in a minute. Okay.
Thanks,
Okay.
Isaac.
Take care. Bye.